See that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people exactly, which I think Tori is our minimum for quorum. And I don't know, you might have to help me since this is my first time chairing, but does that number include our liaisons or not?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. All right. So then I count 5 members besides those people. Welcome, everybody. And I will call the meeting to order and read the statement. The meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with emergency ordinance number 20-A16, an emergency ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The committee members who are electronically present are Thomas Thorpe, Diane Greeter, Diane, Roger, David, Robert, Andrew, Nathan, welcome, and Evan, welcome. And I didn't see anybody else just recently joined. So I think those are our committee members. Representatives from the county are Karen Firehawk, Fred Missel, and Jim Andrews. And Donna is not able to be with us tonight. And then some of our staff members, Tori, Kevin, Carolyn, and it looks like Jessica. Welcome. Just briefly wanted to say we have 2 new members tonight, Nathan and Evan. So thank you guys for joining us. I'm MK, I'm the chair. I know Evan, but I don't know you, Nathan. So it's nice to meet you. And then we also are welcoming Jim. He's new as of last meeting to us, which is awesome. And then Fred Missel, who is our planning commissioner attendee. And Fred's my old neighbor, so I know him too. All right, so the persons responsible for receiving public comment are the 5th and Avon Community Advisory Committee, and opportunities for the public to access and participate in this meeting, electronic meeting, are posted on the Albemarle County calendar. County staff present at this meeting are Carolyn, Tori, and Jessica. The first order of business will be to adopt the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes via email? And is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Wonderful. Are there any discussion or suggested amendments?
I was confused about the phrase 20 vision, if that was intended to be the year 2020 vision, or if it's a 2020 eyesight vision, or it's the next to the last paragraph on the first page.
I think it's meant to say 20-year vision, like it goes out 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a good catch. So I can note that. And Craig's not here, but Diane is going to be helping us with secretary duties going forward. And so I will send you, Diane, a Word document. Actually, I've already sent it to you, so you could make that change for us maybe. Oh, you're on mute, Diane.
How do you want that worded, MK? In the minutes?
Well, Roger, do you think it should say the comp plan is a 20-year vision? I think we just need to add the word year. Mm-hmm.
Okay, a 20-year vision. Okay. Will do.
Any other discussion or recommended changes? All right. I don't see any hands, so all in favor of approval of the minutes with the noted correction?
Aye.
And anybody opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. The next item of business is going to be the election of our remaining officer, which is the vice chair. So at our last meeting, we were, well, I volunteered to be the chair because no one else did it. And someone has to do it. But we did not have any members attending at the last meeting who were available to be the vice chair, or we would also accept a co-chair per Roger's recommendation of having one person for the Fifth Street side and possibly a co-chair for the Avon side. So if anybody who's here who was not here last meeting, or anyone else who was here last meeting who's changed their mind, would like to volunteer, or if you'd like to nominate someone else who you think might be interested, we would accept a nomination from the floor at this time. I will say, for those that weren't here, there was a healthy discussion last meeting about the responsibilities for a vice chair. And so as chair, the responsibilities are to conduct the meetings, obviously, and help Tori prepare the agendas and get those out to people ahead of the meetings. And the vice chair's role would basically be to step in to conduct a meeting if for some reason the chair was unavailable, which doesn't happen often, but does sometimes happen. So I was the vice chair for 2 years under James, and I think I chaired 2 meetings in a 2-year period as his backup.
I'm happy to step up if nobody else wants to do it. I'm on the Fifth Street side, so I don't know what side you're on. So if we're trying to get, either side, I'm on the Fifth Street side. So.
Well, I am as well, but if I think in lieu of equal representation, it's more important to have somebody around in case I can't be. So
we can have you over for a picnic or something just to, get to know the area.
yeah. And Nathan, I will tell you, I became the vice chair for 2 years at my very first meeting of this committee.
Okay.
About 2 years, yeah.
Okay. So I'm happy to do that.
Okay,
So.
great. We appreciate it. So are there any other nominations or volunteers? All right. So I guess, is there a second to Nathan's motion, I'll call it, to nominate himself? I see Karen Davenport. Thank you, Karen. And all in favor of voting Nathan the vice chair of the Fifth and Avon Committee?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Someone's very opposed. Wonderful. All right, now we'll go to our presentation on upcoming CAC topics, and I'll hand it over to Tori.
Thank you. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Make this a little bit more visible. So good evening, everyone. I think we have a couple new people. So my name is Tori Kenelopoulos. I'm the staff liaison for the CAC. So I'm in the planning department of Albemarle County. And I wanted to give the CAC just a quick update on upcoming meeting topics for the remainder of the calendar year. So we are looking to roll out a more structured approach for CAC agendas for all 7 of the CACs. And there are 2 main reasons for this approach. The first is that we're updating the county's comprehensive plan, and the same staff who staff the CACs are also leading that project, and we're trying to be intentional and efficient with our time. And we also want to encourage CAC members to participate in the comp plan workshops and meetings that we'll have coming up. So this is the tentative schedule, and we're planning to have prepared topics on alternating months. So just like this month where we're talking about transportation, So we would do this setup for each of the CACs with presentations and then time for questions, including questions that are specific to each CAC. So for example, this month, the transportation presentation for this CAC is focused a lot on the 5th and Avon area. So then on the other alternating months, we would reserve time for community meetings. And so those are for rezoning and special use permit applications. And if a community meeting is not needed that month, we would recommend canceling the CAC meeting. And the reason for that is we want to line up the comp plan workshops with those off months as best as possible so that we can encourage CAC members to participate. And we'll have different workshop formats throughout the process. Initially, they may have to still be a bit more virtual, but we're hoping pretty soon to also have in-person formats. So in May, we would cover climate action planning and a budget overview, as the board will likely have just adopted the county's budget. And then in June and August, we would have time set aside for community meetings and for the CACs to choose their own topics of interest. July is planned as a summer recess, which we've done for a couple of years now. And this aligns with the Board of Supervisors taking a meeting off that month as well and gives people time to travel. September would be Parks and Green Systems. Then October would be a community meeting if needed. November would be economic development, and then December would be a community meeting if needed. Also wanted to mention that in the proposed budget, there is a request for 2 new staff members, and they would be dedicated to staffing and supporting the CACs. But in the meantime, we're hoping that this schedule provides flexibility, covers the main topics of interest for the CACs, and also addresses current staff capacity needs. So we're planning to check in at the end of this year, see how the schedule went, and see what kind of changes we may want to make going forward. And then also wanted to mention for 5th and Avon, there will likely be a community meeting in April. There was a rezoning application submitted this month. So I will confirm that with the planner who's reviewing the application and get back to you all, but likely need a meeting for that. So I'll stop there and happy to take any questions if there are any. David.
I just wanted to figure out where we would get to weigh in on the CIP. I guess the budget overview, is that the window for our place to talk about that? I know that's not quite on the same time frame as the budget, but would that be where we would have a chance to talk about it, or would that be too late in the process?
That's a good question. I think I would have to double check. It might be a bit late in the process for that. Might need to be done separately, like CAC members, going separately to, to speak at board meetings, but I can double check on that.
The budget is expected to be adopted on May 4th. So that would be too late for affecting this budget, and many aspects of that are already moving forward very quickly. So feedback on the budget would be appreciated. If it's going to affect changes, there will be some contingency planning in the budget, but I just don't want to mislead you that the budget overview is not really going to be, tell us how you want to change this for this year. It'll be too late.
Okay, thank you.
I will say, I remember, I think it was 2 years ago. It must have been a little over 2 years ago because it was an in-person meeting, and we had the joint CAC meeting at the 5th Street building, and they did that really nice overview of the CIP, and then we all got to work in groups to see how it works. It was very informative. But like you're saying, we're past that point, I guess, for this year.
It's an ongoing process, and so it's not as if to say as capital improvements won't be considered. I mean,
Yeah.
the CIP committee then actually starts up, I guess, early in like September, maybe, to working already on next year's. And of course, it's a 5-year budget. So.
Right. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
That is helpful feedback though. And if that's, something of interest too, that could fit in the August schedule as well, if that's a topic of interest the CAC wants to add.
I mean, I found it very informative, and most of the board members were at the meeting because it was a joint CAC meeting, and I really enjoyed it. So personally. And thank you, Tori. I appreciate staff working on this type of schedule for us. I think it helps us to plan out our topic, for the rest of the year in a meaningful way, and not just kind of haphazardly do it. So thank you guys for doing this. Any other questions for Tori? Okay. Next, we will have Kevin present our transportation planning and project updates. Take it away, Kevin.
Actually, you're going to get me today. So let me share my screen. All right. Okay. My name is Jessica Hirsch-Ballering. I am a principal transportation planner at Albemarle County Community Development. I'm joined by Kevin McDermott, who's our planning manager. He's here to help answer questions. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to just speak up during the presentation, but I'll also stop along the way to take questions. All right. So today's presentation is supposed to be a little bit more than an update about upcoming or ongoing projects. We also want to give you a better understanding of the overall transportation planning process. We're going to be answering questions like, where do transportation projects come from? How are projects chosen? How do we pay for projects? How are projects scheduled? And then we'll get into those project updates, answering the question, what projects are being worked on right now? So first, where do projects come from? We get ideas for projects mostly by recognizing existing traffic problems and anticipating where we're likely to see future traffic problems. We do this through a lot of collaboration. One partner we collaborate with is VDOT, or the Virginia Department of Transportation. VDOT staff are constantly monitoring operations, congestion, and safety, things like the number, type, and severity of crashes. Analyses like these help us identify where problems exist and better understand what might be causing those problems so that we can work with engineers to design effective solutions. Because Kevin and I are in community development, we help review new and redevelopment applications that come into the county. For really big developments, we would likely request the developer conduct a TIA, a transportation impact analysis. With TIAs, they will model what traffic will look like in an area if a new development is built. And that info is very useful for identifying appropriate mitigations for development, or even saying that a certain development isn't appropriate for a particular area. We also work with the Charlottesville Avon Metropolitan Planning Organization, who puts together a long-range transportation plan that models existing and expected future transportation patterns based on existing and expected development. And then we also work with others in community development and other departments of the county to develop a variety of plans, things like the Albemarle Countywide Comprehensive Plan, Area Master Plans, and Corridor Plans. All these plans look at that relationship between land use, development, and transportation, so we can identify those existing and expected future transportation pain points and make plans to address them. Further, these plans involve a lot of community input, so we get to hear directly from residents where they're seeing transportation problems, where do they expect transportation problems to arise in the future, and what transportation needs do they have that aren't currently being met. And how are projects chosen? We have a lot of possible projects, but we also have limited resources. So we have to determine which projects are going to have the greatest benefit to the county. So at one time, we took a look at all of the possible projects that had been identified in that early planning process that we just talked about. We scored them based on these metrics: safety, congestion, economic development, accessibility, land use, and environmental impact. We then ranked them by that score, and we put those ranked projects into a list called transportation priorities. And that list was approved by the Board of Supervisors. So that list has been updated a few times, and we're just about to embark in the next year or two on another update of that transportation priorities list. I'll add that while projects get scored and ranked like number 1, number 2, number 3, there's a lot of different things that go into determining which project we're going to tackle next. It doesn't always go exactly in order, but largely we are trying to go from highest priority down the list. All right, so this slide shows a map of all of the projects on that 2019 transportation priorities list that are for your CAC area. There's the map on the left side and a list of all the projects on the right. The number associated with each project is the project's priority ranking. And the projects listed with letters are projects that have been added since 2019. So they haven't been ranked yet. They'll get ranked when we do that transportation priorities list update that I just talked about. You might see some numbers appear twice. And that's because we had a really big project idea early on in the planning process. It was ranked, got its number, but then it later got broken up into more manageable chunks. Are there any questions here? And I can't see you if you have a question, so feel free to just speak up. If not, I'll just keep going. Uh-oh. All right, so I'm just going to bring up all these guys. How are projects funded? So really broadly, there are lots of different ways to fund projects, but not all funding mechanisms work for all projects. So the funding mechanisms on this slide are ones that, that Albemarle County frequently uses. Let's see, the first one is Smart Scale. Smart Scale is the main way we fund big projects, especially big projects. It's a Virginia-specific funding source. We don't need to commit any local funds for Smart Scale projects. Smart Scale funding covers the entire project. But it is pretty competitive and it only comes around every 2 years. Revenue sharing is another funding mechanism that we use pretty frequently. This is also state funding, but it's better for smaller projects because we have a limit of $10 million per project, as well as a limit of $10 million per funding cycle, which is again every 2 years. And we need to use local funds to cover half of the overall cost of the project. And anything over $10 million has to be entirely covered by local funds. Transportation alternatives is another funding mechanism that we use pretty frequently. This is mostly for bicycle and pedestrian projects. It has a maximum of $1 million per project and $1 million per grant cycle. We have to cover 20% of the project cost with local funds. And also because federal funding is being used, we need to meet federal requirements for these projects. And sometimes those requirements can drive up the cost of a project. And then we have secondary 6-year plan funds. These are not competitive. It's just funding that the county is allocated by the state. We mostly need to use it to pave unpaved roads, but there is some funding within it that's categorized as tele-fee, and that tele-fee funding is a little bit more flexible, so we can use that in some other places to fund other projects, mostly for small maintenance. Here are a couple of funding mechanisms that are less frequently used by the county. So state of good repair is mostly used to fund bridges and road repair. We don't actually apply to use state of good repair funding. VDOT makes their own priority list based on need, and they just use the funds on the bridges and roads that are in the greatest need of repair. HSIP, or Highway Safety Improvement Program, like state of good repair, is not funding that we apply for directly. VDOT has its own process where they prioritize projects based on safety, and they use funds based on their own priority list. And in addition to everything mentioned, there are other opportunities, big and small. One of the biggest funding opportunities out there is RAISE. It has $1.5 billion available for this round, but there's also lots of small funding opportunities. And part of our job is just to look for the right funding opportunity for each project. And last, for funding mechanisms, we'll talk about local funding. So the SIP, or Capital Improvement Program, is where all of our local funding comes from. It can be used to leverage state and federal funding described on those previous slides, or it can be used to construct a project outright. Let's see here. We can also sometimes get developers to do some transportation work for us. So when we expect that a development project is going to exacerbate or create traffic issues, the developer can offer to mitigate those issues by offering funding towards a road project or by building bike, ped, or transit infrastructure outright. And then we have this project implementation or project schedule slide. So every single project basically has 3 main phases. You start with design, you acquire the right of way, and then you move into construction. And each of those phases, the whole length of the project can vary really depending on which funding mechanism that you use. So locally funded projects can happen the quickest. Those projects, once funding becomes available, can usually be completed in about 3 to 5 years. Transportation alternatives or revenue sharing funded projects happen a little bit more slowly, but they can still happen in about 5 to 8 years. And then projects that are funded with Smart Scale often take the longest. They can take as long as 8 to 11 years from the time the funding is awarded. The reason for that is that it's state funding. The state plans out how they're going to use funding for the next 6 years. And when they award Smart Scale funds, they say, okay, you're going to get this money at the end of that 6 years. Sometimes those projects can be fast tracked, but in a worst case scenario, we are looking at as long as a decade for these projects. All right, I'm going to take a moment to take a breath and take any questions that you guys might have.
Thank you, Jessica. If everybody would just raise your hand for questions, I'll try to call on you in the order in which your hand was raised. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. Some projects carry with them ongoing maintenance costs, routine maintenance costs. Say you put a greenway in. I was looking at one a year or 2 back that, you know, it could be 50 trees, lawns put in, you know, sidewalks. Where is the estimate of the cost to maintain those trees, mow those lawns, fertilize those lawns, keep the sidewalks? Is it ever estimated in the final package before we approve it?
That's a great question, and I will take a stab at it and then let Kevin add a few points. So anything that is constructed within the VDOT owned and maintained right of way is maintained by VDOT. So those costs are borne by them. Things that happen in Albemarle County parks, those are maintained by the Parks Department, or yeah, by the Parks and Rec Department. Kevin, did you want to jump in and talk about any like estimating that goes on ahead of time, or is that mostly done by VDOT and parks and the other parties responsible for maintenance?
Sure, you did cover it pretty well there, Jessica. The VDOT funds, they have a separate pot for maintenance of anything in their right of way. So once the project is accepted by VDOT, they use those funds to go ahead and maintain those. When the locality does do a project like a greenway project like you described, and we're going to pay for that out of our CIP, we are required to come up with an estimate of maintenance costs and make sure that we're going to be able to maintain that resource for the future. So anything that is maintained by the county, we do have to provide that as the board and the finance department is making the decision as to whether or not they want to move forward with it.
And do we ever look back to see whether or not maybe 2 years out, 3 years out, it's turning out what we thought it to be? Is there any kind of a follow-up down the road, you know, earmarked?
Are you talking about specifically whether the maintenance issue or just the effectiveness of the project?
Well, actually, those are both. Effectiveness is a good one too. I mean, again, I just look at, we're highly regulated, so anything that we do, Food and Drug Administration expects us to do a look back and say, how well did that work? Why did it work? What didn't work well? How do you continuously improve your operation, the quality of your evaluation? How well are we estimating the ongoing maintenance costs? What are we missing on these things? That's all. I'm just curious whether that kind of program exists.
I wouldn't say it exists specifically. We obviously, is just the way Jessica talked about how we identify projects. that's also a way we review projects, because we know where the projects that we put in go. And so as we look back and we see if the problem is recurring or if the safety issue was not addressed, that is identified, and we'll look at what went wrong there. As far as maintenance, I don't think we necessarily do that, although that's more of a, like I said, the Parks and Rec department are the ones that maintain most of those resources. So they may have something, a separate process that I'm not aware of.
Okay, that's good to hear. The safety ones, you go back and look at the number of accidents and things like that. Or even if it means lowering the speed from 40 to 45 down to 40, you look back and see whether that had a material difference.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin. And Tom, Andrew?
Thanks. Just a quick question about the traffic analysis. I've encountered in my other lives some debate sometimes in the community about the validity of various traffic analyses. And you mentioned VDOT, and I'm sure there are third-party traffic analyses. You mentioned developers doing them as well. How does that play out? What's the trigger for a third party doing it, and who ultimately makes a decision about which data that's generated drives the decision making in the project?
Great question. And again, I'll try it and Kevin can add some details. So I do not know if there's an exact trigger, but for asking a developer to conduct a TIA, a transportation impact analysis, when they do conduct them, they'll often specify which kind of software program they're using. And there's certain accepted software programs that they would use. Similar with VDOT, they're using some pretty established programs, but they're also always trying out new programs. There's the name of it is escaping me, but yeah, they're also trying out new stuff. Kevin, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. So a couple things. The state has a pretty hard and fast rule that if a proposed development is going to add 5,000 vehicles per day to a public road, they have to perform a TIA. And then there is a documented process that they have to follow for that TIA. You have to use all these, very specific standards for estimating how much traffic you're gonna generate. That's the ITE trip generation handbook. It's a transportation engineering handbook that has the amount of trips that any type of development might possibly generate. And that's obviously constantly updated as they do more and more studies about how many trips different types of development would generate. The county, however, we don't have a specific number in our code that says at this point you have to perform a TIA for your project, but we have in the planning department, we've come up with the general rule that if you're going to generate 1,000 or more vehicles a day, that we would like to see that TIA. And we require those developers to use the same standards that VDOT requires in those. And VDOT works with us on those as well. They review them and review the analysis, make sure it all checks out and does it. So it's really for the county projects, we use that 1,000 vehicle per day limit.
That's terrific. Thank you. And is there a does the code allow for an anomaly or an outlier where there's a particular specific concern in a neighborhood related to a previous accident or accidents or something of that nature, where you can, as a county, say, well, this, we might not get 1,000, but we'd really like to see this analysis done because of the unique nature of this project?
Yeah, officially, the county planning staff can really require any level of analysis for any project that they think is worthwhile. And that I'm saying that for legislative projects. So if they have to come in for a legislative decision, such as a rezoning or a special use permit,
right,
that's when that is triggered. And staff and the planning director can really require whatever they want. And we do that. That's why I say it's approximately 1,000, because that's a general rule. But if they're going to put 1,000 vehicles onto like 29, right, where we just improved it to 4 lanes and all the operations are phenomenal, we're going to say, 1,000 may not really be enough because it's just not going to impact anything. But if there's a little bit below 1,000 on a much smaller road, then we would ask for it. And we can also ask for safety studies, not because the TIAs are predominantly looking at congestion, but we can also say there's a high accident location. We want you to look at these accidents, see if you might exacerbate them, and come up with recommendations to try and fix that.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Kevin and Andrew. Nathan?
Yeah, I just was curious on the priority list. How often does that priority list get updated? You might have mentioned that, but as we know, things change. And so I was just curious if how often those projects move up or down.
Yeah, I'm gonna hand that over to Kevin again because the last time it was updated was 2019, and I don't know how many times it was updated before that, before I got to the county.
Yeah, so it's been kind of a adaptive process, to be honest with you. So I think early on there's always been different standards for how we update that. And so I think when I started with the county 6 years ago, I had updated it within that first year. And then I realized I should probably do a better job on it. So I updated it again immediately. And then we said, okay, we're going to do it every 2 years from here on out. And then we did it in 2019. But then what happened when the pandemic hit, the state pulled back tons of funding, and we weren't able to really move through the projects that we were trying to do. So we held off to see what was going on with state funding before we were going to update it again. And that's why even though I had said 2 years previously in 2019, we're just really getting into it now. And as we're doing it now, what we're really looking at is working through the comprehensive plan process that we're starting, and we're going to try and come up with some methodology that might even do a better job than we have in the past for updating it. So we'd like to really get that done by the end of this year so that we're ready for the next round of grant cycles, which will come about in early in 2023. So we want to be able to know what projects to go for at that time.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for you guys. So let's say we identify a problem in a particular location, and maybe Jessica mentioned this, but who generally comes up with the solution? So, like if we're going to go for a smart scale funding, do I understand correctly that we kind of need to know what we're asking for? We have this problem on 5th Street, we need to solve it, but who decides what the solution is before we apply for funding?
Yeah, great question. Smart scale in particular is really open. So we can identify a problem area and we can tell VDOT well in advance of the smart scale application process opening. We can tell them, hey, we have this problem area. This is something we want to address. And they have either staff in-house, and sometimes they use consultants to help come up with those early design ideas for how we could address those issues. From there, we get like a really broad cost estimate. And if the funding is awarded, then they would move into far more specific design. We'd move into what we call preliminary engineering, where it gets a lot more technical. You get engineers involved and you really think through the technical aspects of that design. But the early design work, especially for smart scale, is done by VDOT.
And is there any type of opportunity for community input in that process?
Yeah, so smart scale so the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, which is one of our partners that we work with locally, they deal with the whole region. They recently hosted a smart scale application webinar where they went over all of the projects the PDC is applying for, the MPO is applying for, the county, as well as the city. So that was a place for the public to generally come and learn about those projects. All of that information is on their website. And from there, we'll continue moving through the application process, and it'll go before all of our elected bodies. to ensure that the elected officials are on board with these applications.
Thank
And
you.
I'll just add also, so that is one way that we do it, but we have lots of other options for evaluating and identifying specific projects. Just if you were around during the like the Avon corridor study, I can't remember if you were on the CAC at that time, but you know, that had a lot of that public input during the corridor study process, and there were some specific recommendations. Well, those specific recommendations are actually ones that Jessica's going to be talking about here in a second, that we are now going for grants for. And so a lot of times the county can take on a corridor study, which identifies a very specific solution for projects that we then turn into grant applications like Smart Scale or revenue sharing.
Thank you. Yes, I missed the Smart Scale meeting, but I watched it after the fact. And so one of the things that came to my mind, you guys might be familiar with this, I think it's in the city on Avon, right? When you go into the city, they're talking about eliminating parking on one side of the street and how that's not going to affect anybody. And I was like, I don't know if that's true, but I know some people that live in that direct location who might be not so happy with that, but that's a minor problem. Just my last question, then I'll go to Evan. The slide that you showed, Jessica, that showed the projects in our area, is there a place that we can go and look at that, or is that an internal document for you guys? I mean, it's a lot of detail there. I know we didn't spend a lot of time on it, but I'd love to have the chance to look at it in more depth.
So we'll share this a PDF of all of these slides with you guys after the meeting, so you can share it with the whole group.
Great, thank you. Okay, Evan.
You asked my question about the slide, so, but I also attended that webinar on Smart Scale and found it incredibly informative. So, I mean, I found the opportunity to listen in and the opportunity for input really deep and broad. So compliments to everyone involved in that from the county side.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, well, we'll move on into the fun part. So we're going to start talking about the projects that are happening right now or upcoming. So this is the Route 20, Route 53 intersection improvement. So the plan for this project is to construct a roundabout at this intersection to improve safety. So this project was funded in the previous round of Smart Scale. You'll recall that Smart Scale projects usually have a really long timeline, but this project was fast-tracked by VDOT. Fast-tracked is a relative term with transportation. So VDOT staff are out there right now doing initial survey work, but you won't hear about this project again really until their first public meeting that VDOT will host on this project, and that won't be until spring of 2023. They hope to have a consultant under contract in early spring of 2024, and then you wouldn't see any actual construction until spring of 2025 at the earliest. Any questions about this project in particular? Next, we'll talk about the Old Lynchburg Road 5th Street Extended intersection improvements. Again, this project would construct a roundabout at the intersection of Old Lynchburg. This is Old Lynchburg. This is also Old Lynchburg. It's where it turns. This is 5th Street Extended, and this is the county office building. So this is another project that was funded through the previous round of Smart Scale. It's running on that same timeline. It was also fast-tracked, so you'll be hearing about this project again when they host a public meeting in spring of 2023. And again, you'll see construction as early as spring of 2025. Moving on to Old Lynchburg Road bicycle and pedestrian improvements. So now we're staying on Old Lynchburg, but we're moving a little bit north. Here's I-64. So this project is currently under design by consultants. Their task is to design bike and pedestrian facilities from Timberland Park apartments up to Azalea Park. And it might seem like this short little thing, but it's a really important connection because right now there's no facilities and it's particularly dangerous when you go under 64. They've already done their initial survey work and they're going to be presenting their initial design ideas to county staff next week. Next, we'll talk about Avon Street Extended Sidewalk Project. So this is a project that's already under construction. The project has two main parts. So to orient you, this is now like the north heading towards Charlottesville. This is the south. This is Mountain View Elementary. So for this project, the first part would be to construct sidewalk on the east side of Avon from Swan Lake Drive. Oh, I lost my cursor here. From Swan Lake Drive over here down to Mountain View Elementary. And the other part of the project is to construct sidewalk on the west side of Avon from Stony Creek Drive south to Arden Drive. So like I said, this project is under construction, but they've encountered some supply chain issues with, I think, like underground pipes and things like that. But they still expect to be complete by August of this year. All right, so now we're going to get into some projects that have not been funded yet, but we and our local partners are applying for competitive funding in hopes of making these projects happen in the future. So there's going to be a couple projects about happening or being proposed for Avon Street. This project would construct a shared use path on the west side of Avon from Mill Creek Drive, which is over here, down to, let's see, up to Paragory Lane. There would be a crossing of Avon somewhere near the Lakeside Apartments, but the exact location hasn't been defined yet. So like we were talking before, we have an early concept. If the funding is awarded, we would move forward with a far more specific design, and that's when we determine exactly where that crossing of Avon would be. So this is something that Kevin and I, that county staff, will be applying for Smart Scale funding for in this coming round of Smart Scale. Our partners at the MPO are also applying for a project on Avon a little further north. So for this project, it would construct a shared use path on the east side of Avon from Avon Court over here, all the way up to Druid Avenue. It would also construct a bike lane on the west side for that entire length and a sidewalk on the west side in the city only. So basically from here's Druid, there's sidewalk all the way up to Palatine, and the sidewalk would be constructed from Palatine to the bridge. This is the project I think you were referring to, MK, where some on-street parking would be removed and relocated. I don't know exactly where it would be relocated though. Any questions about this project in particular? All right. So now we're going to talk about some Fifth Street projects. And again, these are proposed projects that we're seeking funding for. Our partners are seeking funding. So these are not official yet, just proposed. So this first project, and there are going to be three of these that have all come from the Fifth Street corridor study that was recently completed. So this project would construct a shared use path from Ambrose Commons down here, all the way up to Stagecoach Road up here. So a development has proffered a shared use path between Old Lynchburg Road and Wahoo Way. So they're going to build that, and that's going to happen far sooner than anything else happens. So you can expect to see that little bit of shared use path come in pretty quickly. And then if it's funded, you'll see the rest of that shared use path come in at a later date. Also, as part of this project, the project would remove a vehicle lane for southbound traffic on Fifth Street from the Old Lynchburg roundabout up here all the way down to Ambrose Commons. And this project would include a crossing near Hickory Street. This is Hickory and the Southwood developments over here. It would include a crossing so that people from this development could get over to this proposed shared use path and access, get all the way up north towards the city. All right, our partners at the MPO are also applying for for Smart Scale funding for Fifth Street. This project would construct a shared use path with an 8-foot shared use path with 4-foot buffers from Harris to Fifth Street Landing. And what you're seeing here is like a cross section of the roadway. The top is what it looks like now, where you have this sidewalk on either side. You have bike lanes in the travelway with no separation from vehicles except for the painted line. And this is what it would look like in the future if this proposal is funded. So we would take those bike lanes out of the travelway and have a shared use path that's 8 feet wide on either side. All right, and then the city is also applying for funding for a potential project on 5th Street, again, further north. So they do not know exactly what they want to do in this area, but they do know the project area that they want. So they are looking at doing something to do bicycle and pedestrian improvements from Cherry/Elliott up at the north, all the way down to Harris Road. And like I said, they don't know exactly what they're doing yet, but they know it's going to be some sort of bicycle and pedestrian improvement. And lastly, because transit is also transportation, we wanted to let you know that there are some transit improvements planned for your area. If you're curious to look at all of the different transit improvements, I've included this website here. And again, you'll get a PDF of all these slides, so you can find their website that way. This is the CATS website. They will show you all of the different transit changes that have been proposed, but these are the ones that are most likely to impact your area. So this is the Route 2. This is what is proposed for the future. So the Route 2 currently runs as a sort of loop, but what they want to do is change the loop to becoming this like bisecting route. So you'd have a 2A that comes down here and goes past 5th Street Station and goes to Willoughby Shopping Center and then comes back up. And that would run every 60 minutes. And running every 60 minutes, but like 30 minutes offset would be Route 2B. So you'd come from downtown, you'd go down this way and you'd get over to PVCC. So those are the changes proposed for Route 2. There's also changes proposed for Route 3. So Route 3 used to have this like eastern section that went over by Belmont Park. They're chopping that part off and they're calling that part 3E, and this is the new 3. So it'll come down to Willoughby Shopping Center and it'll go down to Hickory Street down. I think this is the Southwood development here. This service is also going to be increased in frequency. So you're going to see 30-minute weekday service. They're going to keep their 60-minute Saturday service, and then they're also going to add 60-minute Sunday service. So a lot more service. And then they're also proposing to change Route 6. So the difference here, this is the new proposed route. Previously or currently 6 also goes over to UVA, but that is not going to happen with this new Route 6. It's going to go from downtown down to Willoughby Shopping Center and back. And that is going to continue to be a 60-minute headway. And that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see everybody, but I'm happy to take questions.
All right, thank you so much. Roger, you're first. You're on mute, Roger. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Sorry. So Jessica and Kevin, on the Avon corridor, it looks like pieces of the corridor study are being picked for implementation, and I'm presuming those are based on some priority as well as what's affordable. And I just wanted to register a concern that if the pedestrian bridge over I-64 is not included, which I don't think it is, that we're kind of encouraging more people to walk along the sidewalks, but then when they get to that bridge, it remains really narrow. So I just want to register that concern, and I think it should be a higher priority to get that pedestrian bridge over 64 in there.
Thank you so much for the comment, Roger. We recognize that it's really important to continue our pedestrian facilities. One of the challenges with bridges is that it's just really expensive to add pedestrian facilities to bridges, especially when they're not wide enough to accommodate them. That often means, adding to a bridge or constructing a separate bridge facility. And with Smart Scale, Smart Scale funds are awarded so on like a cost benefit analysis. So the higher the cost, the less likely it is a project is going to get funded. So I think the particular project and the way it's designed right now, while it doesn't get us all the way down Avon, it's designed to be fundable. It's designed to actually happen. Kevin, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you got it right. And I agree, Roger, that it's a really important connection. But what we're trying to do is be strategic about it, and we break the project up into something that we think is fundable. And we also think that if we get that section to Paraguay Lane, that is going to eventually make the bridge a little bit better of a score, because then you're connecting to existing facilities there. So recognize and agree entirely that that bridge is probably one of the most important pieces of this, and we are building towards it, just trying to be strategic about it.
And just thinking about it right now, maybe there's some interim solution where there are Jersey barriers between the shoulder and the traffic lane. I don't know if there's even room to do that, but just something to make pedestrians safer crossing the bridge as a temporary measure.
We can take a look.
That's a great suggestion, Roger. David?
Hi, thanks. Great presentation, Jessica. I really appreciated it. I had a couple of questions though, and maybe you can double back to a slide to help me understand. Reducing Old Lynchburg Road from 2 lanes to 1 down to Hickory. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, let me bring that one up. Hopefully.
Okay, sure. While you're bringing it up, and I don't mean to steal Andrew Vaniski's stuff, but Southwood's proposing an additional 1,000 homes in their neighborhood down there. And we're going to take away one of the travel lanes to get to those homes. And that just seemed an odd way of approaching that. And I know that there were some discussions back in December or November about the transportation study coming out of that. So I was a little confused. And then the shared use path that was proposed here, is that going to be on the west side the whole way down from Ambrose Commons up to Stagecoach, or would it be on the east side, east being the side with Southwood and the county office building?
So it would be on the west side for the entirety of this project. And that is why this project would include a crossing of 5th Street or of Old Lynchburg near Hickory. So down here.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
because right, I mean, as we see it these days, right, we do see people walking on, as we get closer to the city, certainly walking on both sides of 5th Street extended prior to the city limits without sidewalks. So that would be something else I'd like to see. And then lastly, you said a project from Harris Road to 5th Street Landing. Is that 5th Street Place? Because I'm not familiar with 5th Street Landing.
It very well could be. Kevin, do you know if I referred to it by the wrong street name?
I'm sorry, I don't know that segment very well, so I'm not sure. I think that's the one that's entirely in the city. Is that right?
So that would be 5th Street Station Parkway. That's okay. And Kevin, I've already been in touch with Kevin about that, right? We're a small little scrappy bunch of county residents, landlocked sort of inside the city. We have to come out Harris Road in the city to get anywhere, to get out of our neighborhood in Willoughby. So anything that the city's doing there to make it safer, we know that they've reduced the speed limit there, but also anything we can do to support reducing not just the number of fatalities, which are related to just the way the road's constructed in the city, but the sheer number of fender benders. That has become a huge cut through for county residents, particularly those leaving Fontaine coming through JPA and Harris Road, and then on to Fifth Street to get to Fifth Street Station Parkway, to get to Avon, and the housing developments there and on that side of the city. So we need to be able to work. It's a city project, but it impacts a lot of county residents. And so we need to be able to continue to work with the city on that. And Kevin's given me some contacts with the MPO and with the city to make sure we're talking about that. You know, the fatalities are one thing. The nuisance accidents at Harris and Fifth and Fifth Street Station and Fifth, while in the city, really have a big quality of life impact on any number of county residents. So whatever we can do to help the city get that and make those intersections in particular safer. I know that the city had done its project. There was the STARS project as well. And the last thing, I didn't hear anything about safe routes to schools. Is that a transportation funding that we just use whenever it pops in and we can make use of it, like with the crosswalk for Mountain View and that type of thing?
Yeah, I think safe routes to school is something that's been used by the county recently. I think some projects had just recently been constructed or are still in the design phase. I think it's just something that hasn't been used, or we are not currently seeking any safe routes to school funding, in part because of the requirements that come with those federal dollars.
And to clarify, the safe routes to school is actually a category of transportation alternatives. So that's on the same cycle. It's the same piece. It's just same funding and everything. So that's what, when she brought up transportation alternatives, that includes safe routes to school.
Okay, thanks.
All right, we have time for one more question. Nathan?
I just wanted to say I appreciate the amount of traffic circles that I've seen in these new plans, because I really do like traffic circles and I think they're much safer than regular intersections. As we know that, and I'm new to the board, I'm just curious, the city has recently dropped the speed limit on Fifth Street in the city. Is that something that you all look at when you're doing your traffic studies to see if dropping the speed limit would make a difference? I'm just curious if that's, something that you all look at to help a situation maybe in a specific area.
Yeah, speeds, along with all of that other data that we talked about, is something that's being continuously assessed by VDOT in particular, and we get in on those analyses and assessments. And I just want to let you know, if you want to be a traffic expert, traffic circles are a little bit different than roundabouts. So what you're seeing are roundabouts. So now you have the vocabulary to call yourself a traffic expert.
Thank you.
And I will also add, Nathan, great to see you, by the way.
You too.
So these projects that we're doing, like the roundabout, those are intended to slow traffic. And the way VDOT manages the speed limits of all the roads in the county, and we can't really do much about the speed limits. But what we can do is we can find ways to get people to physically change the roads so that people will slow down, and putting in roundabouts is one of those. So if we can get a roundabout in, and we can do other features like narrowing lanes and adding other, bike ped facilities, bringing development closer in on the road, that naturally slows traffic. And then we can go back to VDOT and say, look, the traffic's just traveling slower here. Can we just lower the speed limit? And VDOT won't let us lower a speed limit to anything within, it has to be within 5 miles of the average or the 85th percentile of speed. So they'll go out and measure it and say the speed limit's 45 and we want to lower it to 40. If they go out there and measure it and in the 85th percentile is over 45, they won't allow us to lower it to 40. They say it's got to stay at 45. So it's a constant struggle that we're having. VDOT has these very specific regulations that they follow for things like that. And we're trying to push back on them as much as we can, but also find other options for reducing speeds.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Jessica. I'm glad to hear. I'll keep speeding so I can keep up that percentage. All right. I think that if there are no more questions, I think that concludes this portion of our agenda. Thank you to Kevin and Jessica for the presentation and the thoughtful answers to all of our questions. Next, we are going to hear from Andrew regarding the Southwood project for an update there.
Thank you, and thank you all this evening for allowing me to come before you and update you on both the phase 1 as well as the phase 2 portion of Southwood. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. I have a photograph, a graphic, and hopefully a short video to give you an update on what all has been happening in phase 1, and then conclude in my 10 minutes I have with the couple of graphics that we taken from the phase 2 rezoning code of development. So let me start with the photograph. So can you all see a photograph?
Yes.
Okay, well, this photograph I took this week, folks. This is a photograph of the very first foundation that we've completed in Southwood. It is in the Village 1 area of phase 1. It will be the first habitat home to be completed. It is a duplex, and that one unit of the duplex will be the model home for the Southwood residents to come and enjoy and see what a habitat duplex unit looks like once it's completed. What you see behind you is the area that's going to be mostly made up of our condo units. We have 4 condo buildings planned. Those condo buildings are designed and completed, and we hope to break ground on those condominiums to the left of this photograph, just behind that piece of equipment, sometime in early May. Does anyone have any questions for me just on anything that you may have with regards to Village 1 of what we've completed so far before I move on?
Andrew, thank you. Where are you vis-a-vis the original timeline and what was going to be finished when and that was talked about publicly?
Yes, let me pull up the next graphic. So can you all see another graphic on the screen that shows parts of Old Lynchburg Road?
Yes, we see it, but it's
Okay,
small.
great, terrific. This is blocks 9 through 12. And this is the next section of lots that we will be delivering as part of phase 1. Phase 1 was planned to be started in the summer of 2022, which we are. So we will have as many as 29 homes starting for the habitat portion of the phase 1 Village 1 area by this summer. This area is currently under construction. As many of you know, going down Old Lynchburg Road, you'll see that work. This is actually blocks 9 through 12. And we were supposed to have these lots delivered by this summer, which we expect to. Most of these lots that are planned here along Old Lynchburg Road are lots that are going to be sold to one of our builder partners. That's Atlantic Builders out of Fredericksburg. So where are we in our overall schedule for phase 1? We have Village 1 is entitled. Village 2 to the left of the screen should be entitled in the next month or two. The lots that you see on the screen here, blocks 9 through 12, 9 through 11. We have just 1 or 2 comments left to get completed our site plan, which is the landscaping, which is what you see here on the screen. This is the landscaping that's planned for just the areas between 9 and 12. And then I believe blocks 11 and 12, which make up the 3 multifamily buildings, which are our PHA partner, the 121 unit rental LIHTC portion of the phase 1 community. That site plan is getting close to being completed as well. So by the next 3 months, we should have all of phase 1 fully entitled. And what I mean by that is all of our final site plans, road plans, and WPO plans will be reviewed and approved by the county and the service authority and VDOT. Let me
Awesome.
show you a quick
Thank you.
video. I'm sorry, if you haven't, do I have any other questions before I move on phase 1? Okay. Let me, if I could, pull up a quick video. Let me see here. Bear with me 1 second. I had it. And I lost it. Here we go. I hope that this video will show up. We just received this video from our contractor today. It's a short video, but for those of you that haven't had the opportunity to get out to Old Lynchburg Road and come in off of Old Lynchburg Road onto Hickory, which we currently have temporarily closed except for the very first section, you won't have seen most of the work that we've been doing since last spring. But let me show you a quick video. This was produced by our contractor, Faulkner Construction. What you're looking at here is blocks 11 and 12, looking north towards the city of Charlottesville. This is Village 1, looking into Village 2, which we should have site plan approval for very shortly. This is Horizon Road. This is the first entrance road coming in off of Hickory that we've completed that takes us down from Hickory that exists today into the Village 1 and Village 2 areas. Most of the lots you're looking at here are our partner Southern Development Homes. They'll be building most of the single family detached lots that abut Old Lynchburg. All right. I am still on my Zoom. Can everyone still see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. What I would like to do now, just quickly, is to just run through a few slides of our code of development for phase 2. We originally submitted the phase 2 rezoning application in October, and we recently resubmitted the rezoning application here just this past month in February. We believe we now have a planning commission hearing scheduled for April 26th. So just a few weeks away. I just want to show you all a couple of just quick graphics. This is the phase 2 area that you see colored on the screen. The phase 1 area is the video and the graphic, the landscaping graphic I showed you just a moment ago. This area being phase 1, the 93 acres as part of the phase 2 rezoning is what's represented here in this colored graphic. This is really just an illustrative to give everyone a sort of an idea of what could be part of phase 2. Just quickly going down through these graphic slides here. One of the things we just wanted to point out is that we are showing in this graphic that we are really just an extension of the block diagrams that were created as part of the phase 1 rezoning. This being the more high density mixed use area. And then the darker colored areas show the more high density type residential uses. And then as it transitions away from Hickory, away from Old Lynchburg Road, you'll see the yellow and the cream colors that represents the lower density areas that are being proposed as part of the phase 2. I think an important graphic that we were benefited by having communication and discussions with the county's Parks and Recreation group. They were kind enough to share with us this graphic. And this graphic, I think, is a really good illustration of really where Southwood and the phase 2 portion of the project fits within the surrounding open space areas, mainly the Biscuit Run Park area. So what you see here, folks, is this is the 93 or so acres that make up the phase 2 portion of Southwood. And then, of course, all the things that you see surrounding much of the Southwood phase 2 areas that is what's planned as part of the future improvements to be implemented within the Biscuit Run Park. How that works in association with what we're proposing on site, well, we have a graphic here that just quickly represents some of the open space areas that we're proposing within the Southwood Phase 2. That makes up almost 30% of the total acreage of the 93 acres that are planned as part of the redevelopment of Southwood. And really, that's what I was just hoping to get across this evening. I don't have anything else further. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have. Thank you.
Andrew, where can we find that map you just showed, the one with that showed the Biscuit Run in conjunction with?
That graphic appears in our code of development.
Okay, so if we went on to the county site where they have that information, we would be able to pull this up and look at it in more detail.
I believe so. Yes, I believe so. Yes, this was a graphic that we were able to receive just a few weeks ago, and we quickly implemented it into our code because we thought it was an important graphic to share, and we were impressed and encouraged by what we saw here as well.
And I'll just add, sorry, it's Megan from Williams Mullen, that I believe that since Parks and Rec shared this with me, it's now on their website, because the board adopted kind of the plan, and we took up the portion that was adjacent to Southwood into our code of development. But Tim Padalino, the chief parks planning at the county, I believe he added that to their webpage. And if not, you could probably reach out to him to get that master plan that the board adopted.
Oh, good. Well, thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Megan. Are there any questions for Andrew? David?
Andrew, this is great stuff. And Supervisor Andrews may tell us this, but did the board approve the community development block grant proposal last night? I thought maybe you would mention that if they did, about for some
Yes,
trails and sidewalks.
yes, we did.
Okay.
That will be submitted.
Okay, so that's good news.
$1.3 million project.
Right now, that's a tremendous benefit for the interior movement in the community. At the community meeting, Dan Rosenzweig mentioned that you all were open to selling a portion of the property to the school division for an elementary school, which is desperately needed in this part of the county. Has there been any movement on that at all? I look at your proposal there in phase 2 and block 33 at about 4 acres. Looks like a great location for a walkable urban school. And I just wanted to know if there's been any movement with the division or with the county on that at all.
Andrew, I can speak to that point if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah.
Hi, David. I'm Lori Schweller. I'm also with Williams Mullen. Dan and I did have a meeting with Rosalind Schmidt, the COO of Albemarle County Schools, and we talked about our proposal. That proposal right now is set out in a proposed proffer, and we asked her to have a meeting with us so we could talk with her about it. And you're right on target. What we're proposing is that block 34 is about 5.6 acres. And so the proffer offers to hold that from development, to sell it to the schools, or another idea is a nonprofit, so it could be used for schools and or after school program and or private nonprofit preschool program, any of those things that the county or other organizations desire, to sell it at a discount. So we discussed that with Rosalind. The issue there is the size. That's a small site for a school. She said that they typically are looking for at least 12 acres. We understood that, but what we're thinking, and Megan brought up, the idea of the urban school layout, is that there might be something that could be done in a more urban style. And so we're actually going to, Melissa Sims, who works with Andrew, is going to put together, if she hasn't already, a plan to demonstrate for Rosalind what that could look like on that piece of property. And Rosalind will then go back to Supervisor Haas and have some discussions about it. So we're having those discussions now to see what the schools might be interested in.
I think that's fantastic. And I think the idea of, you're right, Albemarle hasn't really done an urban school. And I think as a county, they may need to have their eyes opened a little bit. And I've been serving with them on the long range planning committee. So I'm happy to continue to push on that side as well for that type of amenity, because just the number of students who could walk there, the crosswalk that Jessica talked about would enable the kids from Mosby Mountain and that neighborhood to walk as well to a school in there. I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I think it could be a real model as part of this whole idea of Southwood as its own model in terms of a redevelopment of what could happen. And I think partnering with the county schools would be a tremendous opportunity for everybody involved. Thank you. Glad to see that's going forward.
Thank you, Laura. I am overseeing that design, working with colleagues in my office, and we should have something soon to share with regards to the Block 34 urban school site.
Wonderful and great question, David. Anybody else have questions for Andrew about Southwood? All right, I don't see any hands, so we will move on to our next agenda item. Thank you so much, Andrew. We really appreciate the update, and
Thank you.
good luck with the project. So next we'll hear from our liaisons on an update from the county. And so Donna is not with us, so we'll start with Jim.
All right, thank you. This has been a great presentation. I don't want to keep you long, but it's been a very, very busy couple of months since we last met. I will sort of start with some of the highlights. So one, of course, is you're probably aware that the board has declared the emergency of COVID ended. The continuity of government ordinance is still in effect. But as of our first meeting in April 6th, the Board of Supervisors will be live in Lane Auditorium in a hybrid model that will allow full participation by the public through Zoom and phone and whatever. But we will be there in person with an audience. So welcome to what we hope is a return to the non-pandemic world. That will include the school board and I guess the elected bodies. The statutory bodies will follow, and that's likely to be more like June for the Planning Commission and others to meet in person. This kind of an organization, the advisory committees are currently not scheduled to have a particular date in which we would go back to in-person meetings. But that can expect that it'll happen eventually, but that's where we are right now. I don't know if there are any questions on that. The other big item for the past, I don't know how many meetings already, three meetings already this week, is the budget. And today we officially sort of capped the real estate and personal property tax rates, keeping the real property tax rate level. And the personal property tax rate actually dropping by 80 some cents, 86 cents, I think, to $3.42 per $100 evaluation. So, it's a still, of course, an increase in revenue due to the increase in valuations, but the personal properties were way too much. So we actually dropped the rate to try to bring that back into line with where personal property taxes have been in the past. Because if you ever went shopping recently for a car, they're hard to find sometimes. So their values have gone way up. And of course, we also are, now putting out the budget for the hearing and adoption eventually in May, I believe. The budget includes, of course, the schools and the capital improvement projects, as well as general operations. And that budget while significantly increased from the 2022 fiscal year, because this is the 2023 fiscal year, we go from July 1 to June 30, is substantially increased from what was adopted for 22. It's actually not as big an increase from what is in fact the budget for 22, because there were mid-year adjustments as the recession from the pandemic turned out to not really be what people feared. So revenues were not down, projects did not have to stop, hiring needed to pick up again. And so it looks like really it's about a 2.7% increase overall in the budget from what was adopted, even though, as you might have seen in the paper, it's 20.8% above what I mean, I should say 2.7 above where it is as of December, but much larger from where it was at the beginning of the year. Let's see, on budget, just to say, things are not all totally settled, and I know we've got some items that will take us into future years as well. I just want to alert you to March 23rd, a week from yesterday. The board will talk about Parks and Recreation. And in that context, I know one of the big issues to be discussed is fields at Garden Howe, but potentially, fields at Biscuit Run, and what those fields would look like, whether we're talking about turf fields or natural fields and lighting for fields. I don't even venture where we're going to end up on this, but I will say it's going to be discussed at that meeting a week from yesterday. And we're getting a lot of public comment on it. So that's good, but both ways. Let's see, real quick, redistricting. We have not yet adopted any of the options with respect to redistricting. You may have seen a report that we had been leaning towards option 1. I do believe that's expected to be revisited. It's tentatively between options 1 and 2, but I really say once we revisit, I'm not sure where we'll end up. I don't think we can venture outside any of those 3 options. I say this because it does impact people in the 5th and Avon area, because one of the options had a big part of what's a little bit, to the west of 5th, and parts between 5th and Avon that previously been in Samuel Miller would have become part of Scottsville. But if we adopt option 2, that's not the case. So stay tuned. That's something that's coming up very soon. If you have strong feelings, please let us know. And that's pretty much it. I would say, some of the things the board's talked about earlier than that, and Karen and Fred may say something about the fact that 1805 Avon was approved. That's next to Avinity. And we had a lot of input from the public on CenturyLink and connectivity issues with respect to the internet and cell and other things, especially after the storms of January. And I would say that, we had some really positive developments in terms of commitments to being a little more responsive. And if people have issues, pass them up, because we've been more successful than I would have expected at escalating issues and getting responses. They have new people dealing with those things. So long report, there's probably more, but I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Karen and Fred and the questions.
Any questions for Jim? All right. Karen, Fred, do you guys, who wants to go first?
I'll go because I don't have anything to tell you. Nothing has come across my transom that affects the 5th area Sam Miller district for development area. The only thing I just wanted to check on, since I've got Jim here, is we were told the planning commission would go back in person on April 12th. Is that so? Okay, well, anyway.
Okay, I don't know, maybe I have it wrong. I thought it was a little later than that, but
I was told all hands on deck, so.
All hands on deck, April 12th. Well, maybe it's other.
My attic.
Are you and, yeah, while you're, carry on, I'll go back and look at my discussions of tiers, because I didn't want to use the terminology used by the county, which was tier 1, 2, and 3. And I think it sounds like a ranking, and I don't like to think of it that way. But definitely the elected bodies are going back first, and planning commission will follow.
Yeah,
shortly
okay,
afterwards.
because, and then would the CAC be going back in person then later as well, or?
Later, and I definitely believe that timing has not yet been announced,
Okay.
and is
I
not
think
to,
we've been on the planning commission. We are definitely going in person in Lane on April 12th.
okay, thank you,
You're very welcome.
thank you.
Okay, anyway, if anyone does have, I'll just make a general statement. I mean, if anyone has any concerns about things in the Fifth Street region of the growth area that you guys want to talk about with me, it doesn't have to be something that is on the agenda for the planning commission. And certainly the planning commission is moving into the comprehensive planning process. And I don't plan for this process to be a reactive process. I'd like it to be a proactive process. So if there are things that you think you want to see addressed in the comp plan, just let me know, because we'll try to make sure that those concerns get worked into the schedule. So that's it for me. But I just thank you guys all for your service.
Thank you, Karen.
I'll only add a couple of things. One, first of all, thanks for allowing me to be with you all tonight. Really appreciated the updates. Lori and Dan did provide Supervisor Price and I an update on the work at Southwood about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think. And I've got a tour coming up next Thursday to be boots on the ground, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about that in person. Also, just echo, what Karen just mentioned, which is feel free to reach out to me anytime. Email's easy. It's missel@albemarle.org. And I look forward to working with you all and hopefully meeting some of you soon in person. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Fred. Any questions for Karen or Fred that anybody wanted to raise? Go ahead, David.
And this is maybe more for Tori, is the C rezoning request, is that going to come to us as the community meeting next month, or because of where that falls on the west side of 29, does it sort of fall outside of the CACs generally?
No, I think that does still fall within the Fifth and Avon boundaries. So that would be the one that would come next month. I just need to double check with the planner that the applicant still wants to go on that timeline.
Okay, because that looked like, I saw that come across and I'm like, that's a big piece to think about and to talk about. And I think I saw some deficiencies in there in the documentation that in terms of public infrastructure that had me a little worried. Particularly, there was no mention of schools and what an impact of 400 homes would have on schools either in the rural area or on that side. So that becomes a quick worry. But we'll get to that next month. I just wanted to make sure that was if that was going to come to us or not. And if it wasn't, then poor Fred and Karen and Jim and Donna would get a nice long email that I'm known for things that I take issue with sometimes.
I welcome your emails.
David, you asked my question. So I was curious if that was the one that Tori was referring to earlier. I too had a concern with I think it adds they are proposing adding a stoplight to 29 and that, at their major intersection there, which I don't know if that's a good choice or not. Somebody at VDOT probably knows, but something would be needed, I'm sure. All right, any other questions? All right, I don't see any. So I'm gonna announce that the next CAC meeting will tentatively be scheduled for Thursday, April 21st. And as of right now, that meeting is scheduled to be via Zoom. Opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting will be posted at a later date. in accordance with emergency ordinance number 20A16 and open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. There's no further business. I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you. Oh,
Thanks.
good night.